Hi Harry, I've got your swing up here on the right, and I was just reviewing the lesson you had with Bobby Cole, and thanks for sending that over. It's good to hear what what you've been told before by other people, so it's good. It gives me a little heads up on what you're dealing with. I actually put up a video of Hogan here on the left to talk about a couple things in your swing. Now, unfortunately, in the video that you sent me, the shutter speed's really low, so it's just kind of a blur through impact. But I'm going to talk about one of the things that Bobby mentioned about the release in the golf swing, and we're going to talk about a couple other things as well, of course. But one of the things that he mentions is that your hands weren't rotating over on the follow through, and I wanted to point out that coming through impact, as you can see Hogan on the left here, it's actually more similar than dissimilar to what you have. Using Tiger Woods as an example for you is terrible, especially if you're trying to learn a one-plane swing, because Tiger has a completely different release, and he has to release his hands extremely hard in order to square the club face at impact. So what you're doing is something that's releasing more with the body. So when you're trying to get your body open at impact, your upper body in particular, it's very different than where Tiger has his shoulders shut on the way down and square at impact. So to take that advice is going to completely throw you off there. Now, the reason I mention all this stuff is because when you're rotating your body open, if you rotated your hands over like Mr. Cole mentioned, you would hook the snot out of the ball. You would hit it dead left all day long. So what I wanted to point out is just after impact, you can see that Hogan hasn't released his hands nearly as much as what Tiger's done in that video that he was showing you. Coming through, of course, there's a natural release at this point, and certainly more so than what you have in your golf swing. But the reason you can't release it is because you're so far out in front of the ball. So what I'm going to do here is draw a couple lines to give you some ideas of what's going on here. First one I'm going to draw is right on the outside of the left hip. Let me get this vertical here. And I'm going to try and draw a similar line. It's hard to tell exactly where everything is here, but you can see that the outside of your left hip has moved to the outside of your foot rather than stayed within your feet here. And what this has done is it's got your body way out in front of the ball. Now you have no choice but to flip it. So that's why you get that release where your left hand is kind of facing the sky and you're getting kind of a flippy release because you're so far out in front of the ball. You have to stay back behind the ball in order to release the club properly. If you're way out in front, you'll never be able to get that release, even as Hogan's doing, and you'll never ever do what Tiger's doing unless you just hook the heck out of it and hit it dead left all day, and we don't want that, of course. So the first thing first is that we've got to work on a couple little things right from the beginning. So set up, everything looks quite good. A couple little tweaks here and there, but your grip, looks like your right hand grip's a little bit on the right side here. That thumb's sitting a little bit too far on the right, but overall everything looks pretty good here. But what happens as you go back is watch your hips as they kind of bump out, and I'll draw another line here to kind of give you a visual. Watch your hip as it starts to push out past that right line, and now you've got your spine in a really poor position, and now you're starting to actually kind of lean back toward the target instead of getting behind the ball. And I know that many people think Hogan did the same thing, that he had kind of this reverse pivot type look on his golf swing, and it's just simply not true. It's very bad information. So I'm going to draw a line here on his right hip, and I want you to notice that as he goes back, notice how he's on that right line, completely on that right line going back. He never bumps out past it, and you can see here very, very clearly that his spine, as he nears the top of his swing, is angled away from the target, or has the appearance that it's angled away from the target, and yours looks more stack and tiltish where you're actually angled directly toward the target. When you're doing this, when your hips go away from the target, your upper spine and head, if you try to keep them in place, is going to go toward the target, and that's just kind of a classic old weak reverse pivot. To get power back in your swing, we've got to get you in this looking position. So I'm going to draw a line here. It's kind of an exaggeration, but give you the view that from his spine down through his right leg, you can kind of see an angle here where his chest is angled out over his feet a little bit. Excuse me, sorry, I had a phone call there. So that's where what you're seeing is correct in the golf swings. It's far from a reverse pivot, far from having his spine leaning toward the target. And this is very, very important, that you kind of feel that if you had a necktie on, that necktie would kind of drop over your right knee. And again, to illustrate that, I'll kind of if Hogan had an imaginary necktie on, it'd be hanging down about right here, right over his right knee, and yours would be hanging down in between your feet. So first and foremost, to get power, to get you loaded up behind the ball, this is what we got to do. It's the most important thing in your golf swing, so that we get rid of this weak reverse pivot and keep you from sliding in front of the ball. So you're going to feel that your body's kind of in that little reverse V position, like your chest is angled away from the target, and that your necktie would be hanging down over your right knee. So first and foremost, nothing else matters until we do that. Now, looking at the down the line view, I don't really want to focus on a lot of stuff right now because this face-on stuff is the most important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that for now. Since I've got you for 4 lessons, I want you to do this first, and then we'll talk about the down the line view. But do this first, and then we'll see you in your next lesson.